Welcome to the Positively No Gambling Podcast, a pro football show that is definitely not about betting. My name is Glenn Fraser. It's Wednesday, August the 6th, and this is the 2025 team preview for the Chicago Bears. All right, fun one, fun one. So much has changed in Chicago, so many expectations. Let's get into that now. Preview two big questions from the start of the offseason, recap 24, preview 25, look at some trends and some early against the spread leans. We'll conclude on the two questions and if they have been addressed, do a prelim over under pick for the season total. Final over unders will be part of the conference previews posted right before the start of the season. Okay, two big questions. Can they improve their offensive line? And can Caleb Williams play like the number one pick he was? 2024 recap. The season was a disaster, as has been well documented. 5 and 12, fourth in the NFC North, missed the playoffs, didn't hit their over. They started off 4 and 12 with some pretty soft opponents now that you look at things. And after their bye, they went 1 and 10, not winning a game again after that brutal loss to Washington until the final game of the season when they were able to finally win a game in Green Bay. That was a decent way to end the season, but in totality, just a complete disaster. They were 2 and 7 against playoff teams. They had the one of the toughest schedules in football, and they had the second unluckiest schedule. So the expectations of this schedule, when we looked at it a year ago, going into the season, were that this would be pretty manageable, but obviously Washington turned out to be a very, very good team, as did Minnesota. Um, Green Bay, I think, hit their over. Detroit, Minnesota, all hit their over. The only team that I could find that really was less difficult than it looked at the beginning of the season was San Francisco, and they lost that one anyway. Um, when you look at the Pythagorean versus their actual wins, they underachieved by 1.7 wins, which you could easily find those two games, right? It was the brutal Washington end, and that just still trying to understand what the heck happened at the end of the Lions game on Thanksgiving. We were all watching that one, and that really summed up the season for them. It was that Hail Mary and that just what is going on? Why are they wasting so much time? Don't they realize they have a timeout? Oh my God, they're not going to get a playoff. Ending to that Thanksgiving game. We all know what happened. Eberflus fired, cleaned house, brought in all new regime, and despite all of that, despite how bad things went, because of how poor Caleb Williams looked, mixed with some of the other things, this has got to be a make or break year for him, given that he is came into this league with such high expectations and really did not come close to living up to those in year one. Look at the offense coming into 2025. Their losses were pretty minimal. They let a couple of linemen go, but there's good reason for that. They were a terrible offensive line last year, and they did replace those guys. Khalil Herbert, kind of underrated. I like Herbert, and their running back room is pretty weak looking. That could end up being a meaningful loss. And wide receiver Keenan Allen didn't make any sense to bring him back, and he's still a free agent as of this recording. Okay, so for the additions, they went all in on trying to improve this offensive line. Got Drew Dalman from Atlanta, Joe Thuney they traded for. He's a top notch guard from Kansas City. They also got Jonah Jackson from the Rams. They think that this is where their biggest problems were in the interior of the offensive line, and they, on paper, looks like they did a great job of replacing that bad unit last year with a much better line this year. Tight end, they added Colston Loveland as their first round pick. A little bit surprising. Some people thought they would go running back, but probably drafted just too early to get a running back. They ended up taking one a little bit later in a pretty stacked running back draft, but they got Loveland in the draft. Luther Burden, as well, is their, I believe, second round pick. He's expected to slot in and be the third wide receiver, along with second year pass catcher Roma Dunze, and then their sort of blue chip wide receiver one, DJ Moore. They also added Zacchaeus from Washington, Devin Duvernay from Jacksonville. Before that, he was on Baltimore. So some weapons, some new weapons that go into this offense. Obviously, the biggest change was bringing in Ben Johnson, the offensive guru from Detroit, to lead this team to be their head coach. In terms of X factors, it all comes down to Caleb Williams. It's make or break year. It looks like between the coaching changes and the addition to shore up the O line and to add weapons that it looks to be set up for Caleb to, as long as he executes, as long as he plays up to his potential, this should be a much improved offense. That's the thought, at least. Their defense, a pretty good unit. They were probably better 2 years ago. That's what sort of saved Eberflus a couple of seasons ago. Uh, but still, given they definitely weren't the problem last year. There's some real talent throughout. And in terms of losses, major additions, Jack Sanborn people really like. So that could end up being a bigger loss than it looks. In the interior linebacking spot, edge Darrell Taylor, that's pretty inconsequential. In terms of additions, they added Dio Adewingbo from Indianapolis, who is a underrated edge rusher. I liked that signing. And Grady Jarrett, nose tackle from Atlanta. A little more suspect of that one. In terms of the draft, D tackle Shamar Turner and linebacker Ruben Hippolyte, who is projected to be a starter. So some nice additions to an already pretty good defense. I do like this unit. They definitely have a blue chip cornerback, Jalen Johnson. Montez Sweat has definitely played like a blue chip in the past, and Kevin Bernard I like at safety. They also have a pretty good nickelback in Kyler Gordon, which brings to the X factor. I think if this secondary plays up to and exceeding their potential, boy, we could be looking at a really good defense in a very tough division and with a very tough schedule. So they're looking to level up. Not a ton of signs that they will. There's always that fear that cornerback play, secondary play being as unpredictable as it tends to be, that they could revert to the negative, regress back down to the mean in 2025. But I think this is a pretty good defense. Schedule. Oof. This is a rough one because of the division that they play in. They had, three playoff teams last season, and the matchups that they have to face this year. They play the NFC East, so games against Washington and Philly, two very talented teams, and they also play the AFC North, which requires trips to Baltimore, trip to Cincinnati. Very tough, very, very tough. 31st easiest schedule based on last year's results, or 25th based on this year's over-unders. A kind of average home schedule and a brutal, no matter what you look at, how you measure it, either the hardest or the second hardest road schedule, which is not great for the Bears. They tend to perform very poorly against the spread on the road. When you combine that with a just impossible looking schedule, it's a big, big red flag. And if you're thinking of blindly taking this over, a stat like this is meant to maybe pump the brakes, reconsider a little bit. Like we said, that the NFC East and AFC North opponents is really tough, especially where they have to play those teams. They have to play Washington in Washington. They have to play Philly in Philly. They have to play Baltimore in Baltimore. They have to play Cincinnati in Cincinnati. That's bad luck, right? And even the fourth place matchups look like more bad luck. Uh, they have to play in San Francisco, who is projected to really bounce back. And even though they were a fourth place team, that's going to be tough. They have to also have to play in Vegas, which hmm, you'd rather play in Vegas than in Kansas City or in Denver, but Vegas is scheduled or looks like they're going to be much better than they were last year. So an easy looking game, a little bit tougher. So beware of the schedule, especially on the road. If you do think Caleb Williams is improved, is he improved enough to win some of these road games, which they will need him to if you think they're a playoff team? Some of the additional stats. So they underachieved, like we said, by 1.7. Commanders and Lions finishes almost entirely account for that, though they had some other heartbreakers. Not good in close games, 3-7. Maybe that reverts back in their benefit. The turnover differential, they didn't really give the ball away. So positive fumble differential, which not a giant number, so I wouldn't look at that as a reason to bet on or against Chicago for that reason alone. 23 to 24, they decreased their wins, which is never a good sign, especially the fact that they didn't make the playoffs in 23 and they changed their quarterback after that season. The strength of schedule, tough schedule last year, looks like a real tough schedule this year. Their schedule luck last year was terrible. Maybe that's a good sign. If that reverses this year, what looks like a very tough schedule, hopefully softens up, allows them to win more, be in more games, and have better opportunities to win some of the close ones. Their O-line, we've talked about a million times. The one thing I would say is I am not on the all the way to one side, which puts the blame squarely on the offensive line when it comes to what happened last year with Caleb Williams. I do think that a lot was Caleb Williams' own fault by not getting rid of the ball quickly enough, not making those snap decisions that are required from a quarterback in the NFL. Their D line is pretty good at pass rush, probably need some work on the run stop, but I think they largely address those, or at least there's signs pointing towards that. Okay, the 3-year trend. This is a interesting one and a unsurprising one, but it's just sometimes fun to look at these in all together in one place. These awful trends. So they were 32nd in Pythagorean wins versus actual wins, dead last. They underachieved over the last 3 seasons by almost five full games, which anybody who's a Bears fan, anybody who watches the Bears can point out five, seven, 10 games in which they just gave it away. And they are 32nd in one score games, 6-20 in games settled by one score over the past three seasons. That is remarkable. Now, these are very positive trends when you're looking at 2025 because there is no way this sustains. Ben Johnson, by just being a competent coach, not even a great one, will reverse this trend in his tenure, guaranteed. Now, having said that, in terms of against the spread leans, I don't love much. I found week 15 versus Cleveland. They're a 7 point. Imagine the Bears being a full touchdown favorite against anybody. But in Chicago, week 15 against Cleveland, that's a safe one. I think that they could be even a bigger favorite and it's still justified. There's nothing on the road that I can recommend given their history and their opponents. And straight up, I'm just not going to wager on this team until it's very clear that Williams has dramatically gotten better. I just can't. I can't do it. I can't trust it. I see what everybody else sees, the better O line and the better pass catchers and the genius coach and all of that, but I can't do it because I don't think the quarterback's there. So to conclude, did they improve the O line? Absolutely. I think they certainly did. And is Caleb Williams a real NFL quarterback? That's a big, big maybe. And I'm going to go under 8.5 win total. I think they're probably in that 7 to 9 win range. Definitely a talented team, but it's a really tough division, really tough schedule. This won't happen, but I am almost to the point where I'm going to say they win all their home games and lose all their road games, which would put them right at 8 and 9 and make that under hit. But any kind of season long wager on this team is complete stay away. There's just the variable with the quarterback is way too high. I'm personally not convinced that Caleb Williams is the guy. And even if things improve, I don't think it's going to be enough to lead this to be a playoff team. The coaching improvements should reverse these inefficiency trends. But to hit an over of 8.5, you really got to consider that team to be a playoff contender, a division contender, and I don't see it. So I'm going to go under, at least for now, with the Bears. So that concludes the Bears. Tomorrow we've got, what do we have tomorrow? Ooh, the Cincinnati Bengals. That's another fun one. So a good stretch here with the Bears today and the Bengals tomorrow. So, all right, we'll talk to you next time.